Hello everybody, it's Peter Mizen here from Grace Community Church in Edenbridge. I hope you're all well. Today I'm going to carry on with our series on 1 Thessalonians, the letter that Paul wrote to the Thessalonian church. And we've got up to chapter 4 now, and in this section that I'm going to be talking about, Paul is bringing ideas about what Christians believe about death. So it's a very important chapter. At the time, the Thessalonians who live north of Greece would have been influenced by the ancient Greek ideas about death, about when people die, they have to go into the underworld, they have to pay the ferryman, go across the river Styx. If they've been heroes, they go to the fields of Elysium. If they are others, then they'll go somewhere else. If they're criminals, then they would have been they'd have to be tortured by the Furies until they've paid off their debt. It's all very confusing. It's all Greek to me, and the Thessalonians probably would have been brought up with some of these ideas, the ancient Greek ideas, but the Romans incorporated them in their beliefs as well. They also believed in all sorts of lots of different gods who seem to be warring each other all the time. So this is an important passage for a better understanding of what actually happens when Christians die. At the time, the Thessalonians would have had friends who had become Christians who had died, so they were worried about what would happen to them. So let's have a look at what Paul says. This is from 1 Thessalonians 4, verse 13 to 18. It says, "Brothers and sisters, we do not want you to be uninformed about those who sleep in death, so that you do not grieve like the rest of mankind who have no hope. For we believe that Jesus died and rose again, and so we believe that God will bring with Jesus those who have fallen asleep in him. According to the Lord's word, we tell you that we who are still alive, who are left until the coming of the Lord, will certainly not precede those who have fallen asleep. For the Lord himself will come down from heaven with a loud command, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trumpet call of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. After that, we who are still alive and are left will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And so we will be with the Lord forever. Therefore, encourage one another with these words." So just going to look through this a little bit. As I say, it's not surprising that the Thessalonians were a bit confused as to what would happen when they died as Christians. Notice Paul uses the phrase fallen asleep. What I've just read should actually fill us with joy and hope, shouldn't it? And it's why Christian funerals are not only a time of sadness, but also a time of celebration. Completely different to normal funerals. Now, I've been to quite a few funerals because I do care work, and it's always sad when it isn't a Christian funeral, because there seems to be a hopelessness, whereas those who were Christians, there is hope and there's a looking forward to seeing that person again. Now, in verse 14, notice that Paul uses that phrase, "We believe that Jesus died and rose again." Now, that is central to our faith as Christians, because if that wasn't the case, that he died and rose again, then he wouldn't be any different to, say, Buddha or Muhammad. They died, but they didn't come back again because they were human. Jesus was God, is God. So that's one thing to think about, maybe remember when you're talking to others about your faith. So what will happen when Jesus comes again? So in verse 16 to 18, looking at that raises some questions. I think the first thing that struck me was, well, how does Paul know that this is what will happen? And then you can think about other things like when will it happen? Or what happens before? Or what happens after? It raises all sorts of questions, doesn't it? So how does Paul know? Well, if you look through Matthew chapters 24 and 25, there's actually quite a lot that Jesus himself says about the end times. The end times seem to have a great fascination for a lot of people, Christians and non-Christians alike. If you think about those science fiction films, they're often about the end of the world, aren't they? And it's something which people have been fascinated in and will often come up with all sorts of funny ideas about. Let's have a look then at what Jesus says. This is from Matthew 24, verse 27 to 31. It says, "For as lightning that comes from the east is visible even in the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Whenever there is a carcass, there the vultures will gather." Now, I'll just stop there because I think what Jesus is saying there is this coming again isn't going to be a secret thing. It's going to be very obvious, like vultures around a carcass is going to happen. And then it says, "Immediately after the distress of those days, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. Then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then all the peoples of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other." So you can see that Jesus talks about what Paul mentions. Now, Paul may have got that from other Christians, or it may have been revealed to him on the road to Damascus when he became a Christian. Jesus also kind of backs this up when he's standing before the high priest just before he was crucified. In Mark 14, verse 60 to 62, it says, "Then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, 'Are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you?' But Jesus remained silent and gave no answer. Again, the high priest asked him, 'Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?' 'I am,' said Jesus, 'and you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven.'" So Jesus has kind of said this twice now. Now, I fairly regularly, well, maybe a few times, have heard people say, well, actually, Jesus never said that he was the Son of God, did he? And okay, here he uses the phrase Son of Man, but really, I mean, the priest says, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" And Jesus says, "I am." So if anyone says to you, Jesus never said he was the Son of God, actually, here's a passage you can point to. So what will happen before Jesus comes? Well, in Matthew, Jesus talks about what the prophet Daniel says. And Daniel talks about the abomination that causes desolation standing in the holy temple. And there's all sorts of interpretations for that, but it's obviously not going to be good. There'll be a coming of false Christs, the darkening of the sun and the moon, that we've just read, stars falling from the sky, shaking of the heavenly bodies. Now, if you're into this sort of thing, Revelation gives a lot more detail about what will happen in heaven as well as on earth, and what will happen to Satan and his followers. Now, Revelation isn't an easy read, and there's all sorts of weird and wonderful interpretations that people have given to the passages in Revelation. I'm not going to go into that now. Phil Moore is a good writer and has written a really good commentary on Revelation, so have a look at that one if you're interested. Now, personally, I think the most important thing we get from Matthew 24 and 25 is not so much what will happen, but what's it got to do with me. Now, Jesus made it clear that we don't know when this will happen, although there will be signs. But it raises the question, are we ready when it happens? Are you and I ready for the return of Jesus? If you're not, then think about what we can do to be more ready. So what will happen after he comes again? Now, verse 17 says, we will be with the Lord forever. And the start of Revelation 21 gives us a taste of what that will be like. So I'll just read that to us. It says, then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain. The old order of things have passed away. And skipping to verse 22 of Revelation 21, it says, I didn't see a temple in the city, because the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are its temple. The city does not need the sun or the moon to shine on it, for the glory of God gives its light, and the Lamb is its lamp. The nations will walk by its light, and the kings of the earth will bring their splendor into it. On no day will its gates ever be shut, for there will be no night there. The glory and honor of the nations will be brought into it. So, I hope that's encouraging to us. Certainly reading that is very encouraging to me. And that little phrase at the end of the Thessalonians passage, verse 18 says, encourage each other, encourage one another with these words. Now at the moment we're still in dark and uncertain times. COVID is still with us, although lots of people are trying to pretend that it's not. There's been some terrible things happening in Afghanistan. There's been a clampdown in Russia and in China, Hong Kong. There's all sorts of things going on worldwide. At a more personal level, perhaps you might be out of work, or you're waiting for a treatment from the NHS that they can't provide yet. There's all sorts of problems. But we have a hope, don't we? We have that hope of eternity spent with Jesus. And that should give us joy and peace in our hearts. So, just to summarize, Paul's found out from Timothy, who reported back to him, that the Thessalonians were a bit confused about death and what happened when Jesus comes again, and he's corrected them there. are you and I secure in the knowledge that our loved ones, if they were Christians who passed away, we will see again? Do you believe, like Paul did, that Jesus died and rose again from the dead? If not, you need to talk to someone about that. Now, we don't know when Jesus will come again. Jesus told us that even he didn't know when he'd come again. But there will be signs. Those who are not dead when he does come will join the dead with him and his angels in the clouds. And after that, there will be a new heaven and a new earth, and we'll be with him forever. So encourage one another with these words. Thank you for listening.